All right, so yesterday we did that simulation, the election, and well, what do we got here? Numbers were 16-8. Higginston won. Okay, all right. So yesterday I gave it away what this was, and some of you already picked up on it, which I figured good. Right? Some of you didn't, which is fine. Some of you just didn't pay attention at all, just selected the name and submit. Anyway, so with the election, we had Higginston who won. Anyway, why did you pick? Who do you pick? Let's do it. Pierre Hiddleston. Uh, Albert Higginston. Yep, that's okay. That's okay. Hey, you are having a rough morning here. And Ariel. All right, Calvin and Ariel. Oh, here it is, getting worse. Current events for tomorrow. Tomorrow. Yeah, we'll be here Friday, so Ariel's like, son of a gun. Today is something. Jeez. Today is. Jeez. Give me one. Come on, come on. All right, there we go. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. Bless you. Bless you. All right, so yesterday we did this election. Anyway, we had Pierre Hiddleston, who was the older candidate. Yeah, he was famed, he was a hero in the First World War. And people liked him because, well, again, he was just a well-known name. And obviously, they didn't win the war, the Munchkin Land. But anyway, Hiddleston did have a lot of the popularity of people. Did Hiddleston really have a plan? Did he? Huh? No, he didn't. No, he just thought, you know what, this is just gonna go in a phase, right? Eventually, our economy will pick back up. We'll get a little bit more respect from the other countries in Munchkin Land, just based off of following the rules, following the guidelines that are laid out after that First World War. All right, and then we got Higginson, right? So what did Higginson have to offer? Which he won. Why did you guys pick him? Why did you guys pick him? Jason, go ahead. Okay, all right, yeah, so let's face it, if something's broke, well, you gotta fix it. And if you're already down at the bottom, right, if you're already laying on the ground, so to speak. Okay, it's gonna be a little bit easier to try to establish new guidelines for a better future, right, a stronger future. Anyway, as you can imagine, Munchkin Land is Germany, okay? So when you think about Munchkin Land here, this country that was going through all this turmoil, all its problems, it was right after World War I, it's the Treaty of Versailles. Anyway, Higginson, he did provide a lot of assistance, right? He said, hey, pride, right? You want to look at a stronger future, okay? And you want to get a better economy, putting people back to work, right? Not relying too much on trade with other countries. Well, pick me and we'll move forward, which again, 16-8, that's what it was. So, yeah, Jason, I mean, imagine it, right? Obviously, this candidate might be a little bit more appealing to the people. Okay? Also a very charismatic speaker, which we'll talk more about today. And as you know, Dickinson supposed to represent him. Okay, so obviously you guys were looking in this direction here when it came to obviously getting past some of these problems, some of these issues that Munchkin Land was faced with. Anyway, not to, obviously get you upset or anything about that. The whole point of this simulation was for you to make that decision. Anyway, Elaine, you said something yesterday towards the end of class, were you going to? You had your hand up. I kind of cut you off, sorry. The bell was ringing and, yeah. You don't after, I kind of remember too what it was. Can you remember? You just don't want to get buried here, did you? Okay, all right, yeah, okay, all right. Well, if you remember, let me know, Yes, Ariel. Hiddleston? Here? Let me look at it. Maybe I missed, maybe I'm missing the names here. Pierre Hiddleston? Let me look. No, yeah, Pierre Hiddleston's here. Pierre Hiddleston, yeah. And then Albert Higginston. You wrote it the wrong way. Oh, who did you want to pick then? Hiddleston. Why do you want him? What? All right, yeah. So there's Paul von Hindenburg. Okay, we talked about him yesterday with your vocab term. So in World War I, he was a great general, he was a great leader, and he was popular amongst the people. And you gotta imagine, right after World War I, Germany is faced with a lot of problems, right? A lot of pieces to pick up. So they're gonna go with someone that's a little bit more favorable, right? Someone that's a little bit more popular, that they already know, right? And let's face it, a hero of World War I, even though they lost, okay? So Hindenburg, actually, he wins the 1932 moving to 1933 election, right? He actually wins the election. So Hitler doesn't win, right? Hitler doesn't win. But one thing to note, which we'll talk about today, Hitler did gain about 35% of the vote. So you gotta imagine, right? As Germany is lower than dirt, right? As they're going through a lot of problems here, a lot of issues. Well, Hindenburg decides to appoint Hitler as chancellor. What is chancellor again? One of your terms from yesterday. It's chancellor. Go ahead, Ben.
It's like a very high ranking government official.
Yeah, good job, right? So when you think about, well, in Germany, it's a representative democracy. It's like parliament, right? And it's like a prime minister, the leader of government. So Hindenburg thought, well, this will unite the German people, right? Obviously, they don't really see eye to eye. Hindenburg really didn't trust Hitler too much, right? He didn't like a lot of his actions either, which we'll talk more about those actions with his, rising power. But he realized that, man, we hit rock bottom. The only way to, move forward from this is to unite the country. 35% of the vote is a pretty big number. So if he brings him in, well, this should unite the country together and move it in a better direction. So this is where we see the start, okay? This is where we see the start. So again, the simulation, you guys picked Hitler, right? But that was every class, right? Actually, your guys was, I know it's 16-8. Your guys was I get closest. Anyway, a lot of you probably picked up on it a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. Anyway, so here are your terms for today. I want to talk about Hitler's rise to power and how he gained a lot of support here, right? How a lot of people are looking at his ideology and saying, you know what, it's not the best option, obviously, but it's one of those things where I guess we have no other solution, other choice. All right, so here you go. You got Mein Kampf, Nazi Party, the Reichstag fire, and then the enabling act of 1933. So again, we already did the election, we simulated it. I want to talk a little bit before that, where we see Hitler's rise to power, what was going on during that time. And then obviously we'll catch back up with that election and see where we're going moving from there. All right, so for Mein Kampf, make sure you guys write down that this is in German just means my struggle, right? My struggle. So for Mein Kampf, make sure you put down my struggle, right? That's what it means. Anyway, we'll talk about it here today with Hitler as he tries to overthrow the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s. Well, it doesn't work out for his party, right? And it was known as the German Workers' Party, which is an extreme German nationalist group. Okay, so as this fails, obviously he gets thrown in jail because they thought this guy was too radical. And this German Workers' Party was disbanded. They weren't allowed to meet again, right? So that just means, well, the Weimar Republic is looking at its maybe political rivals. It's an extremist group. And they said, no more, right? We can't have this party maybe rising to gain a lot of support here in Germany. So early on in the 1920s, right, as the Weimar Republic was trying to get its footing, trying to do a little bit better, threats of communism coming in. Well, they throw obviously Hitler in jail because he violently tried to overthrow him. So while in jail, he writes this book called My Struggle, Mein Kampf. Okay, I'm sure you maybe heard of it before. Within the book, he talks about a lot of the issues, the problems that Germany was faced with, the loss of national pride, right? Everything that the Treaty of Versailles hit, right? When it comes to its loss of borders, its territories, its demilitarization, right? Just really the poor stance of Germany after World War One. At one point, Germany was the place to be, let's face it, right? They're a strong nation, they had a lot of great nationalism, a lot of pride in it, right? And now it's nothing. So in other words, he wants to get it back. How does he get it back? Well, first, you got to try to blame someone for all the issues. So who do you blame? Well, obviously Jews, right? Communists even. And the Weimar Republic itself, the government. So through blame, through, obviously, hate, he tries to funnel this anger into creating the enemies of what placed Germany in this bad standing. Again, Jews, obviously, communists, and, well, the Weimar Republic. All right, we'll talk about why this hatred, right? When you think about Germany after World War I, a lot of the businesses, a lot of the larger businesses, a lot of the educators, a lot of the bankers, lawyers, right? People of, let's say, higher status in Germany, right? A lot of them were being filled with, well, Jewish people. So he saw this as the problem, right? Entertainment was controlled by Jews, that's what he said, that's what he said. He's blaming them for this. It's like, wait a minute, are they kind of utilizing us, the German people, as puppets, right, in this society? Now, let's face it, every high standing position and job is controlled by these people here. And that's where he threw the blame. Was it actual factual? I mean, maybe here and there, but no, it was just based off lies, based off of just blame game here in order to get support, in order to get power. So that's what he talked about in this book, right? That's what he mentioned in this book. And as Germany's stance went worse and worse and worse through that economic depression, people start to read this book, and it sounds like wildfire. So much so that the people start to read it and say, you know what, I actually think we can align with this because our standing with the Weimar Republic sucks. Here's our way out. All right. So this book was a top seller, big time, in Germany and actually pretty much all of Europe. Okay. And with Mein Kampf, well, this was kind of a rallying point for Hitler, as he was in jail for trying to violently overthrow the government. All right, the Nazi Party. So the Nazi Party is the Nationalist Socialist movement, okay, within Germany, and this was an extreme nationalist group, right? Fascist, right? So far right on the political spectrum, which we'll talk more about that political spectrum here soon. Anyway, what do they want? Well, obviously through this party, they view the German people as the Aryan race. So fascism, so Nazism, it's just fascism, but extreme racism involved as well. So they view the German people as the Aryan cultures, the blonde hair, blue eyes, right? This Nordic background, this ancestry, okay? And any other race is viewed as inferior, viewed as subhuman. So this was, again, to a point, fascism, but it has more of a racial connotation to it. So the Nazi Party, extreme nationalism, German Aryan race, right? And pushing for the pride to be coming back in Germany. All right, the Reichstag fire, we'll talk about it. The Reichstag, just make sure you guys know this, the Reichstag is Germany's Capitol building, right? So it's like their parliament building where these representatives will come to vote for the Weimar Republic, right? Eventually that's gonna get torn down, literally burned down. Well, anyway, as this fire erupts in the Reichstag, right after Hitler becomes chancellor, after Hindenburg dies, oh boy. Well, he utilizes this as a means to unite the people and to really focusing the attention on who started the fire. Well, no one really knows for sure, but chances are it was a Nazi official. And this is the way they it was a false flag, a red flag event here, where they just blame the communists for it. They blame the Jews for it. And in doing so, well, this push for Hitler to say, you know what, in order to try to protect ourselves from the threats of communism, the threats of these far left radical viewpoints. Well, how about you enable me? So enabling Act of 1933 just means that he pushed for a vote where these representatives would make him the Führer, the dictator of Germany. And that's what happens here in the Enabling Act of 1933. Well, how did it happen? Because it's Reichstag fire. Imagine it, right? The Capitol building burning up in flames. People are in fear. They don't know what to think, right? They don't know how to cope. So they decide through fear and blaming, right, the Nazis, they decide to push for this enabling acts. And the people of Germany are like, you know what? We'll go with it. And we'll talk about what Hitler has done, and what he does later that really kind of unites the German people and say, you know what, this is our best solution. Here's our best choice. All right. So there are your terms for today. Make sure, I hope you guys wrote some of the stuff down here that I was saying as I was going through it. All right. So his rise to power. Let's get to it. Let's get to it. Like I mentioned, I'm going to kind of skip through some things here. Usually, typically, I start with Benito Mussolini or Stalin, one of the two. But because it just makes more sense moving with this election, I'm going to start with Hitler and the Nazis. All right. And then I'll kind of backtrack a bit, which I'll talk about more next week, right, when we get back to these dictators. Real quick, Adolf Hitler, Germany. So like I mentioned, leader of the Nazi Party, the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party,
right? And again, he pushed for this German racial superiority. So whenever you hear this Aryan race, the blonde hair, right, the blue eyes, right, the white skin, right, this is what, again, he was trying to invoke and explain to the German people that they are better than everybody else, right? That they need to get this pride back, that they need to literally push out a lot of the people that let's say shouldn't be in the country. And as these borders were redrawn after World War One, well, there's a lot of people coming into Germany that maybe didn't fit this narrative, and that's what he viewed as a way to try to, obviously push for his agenda and push for this nationalist socialist movement. All right, so I'm just going to put this up here quick, and then we will. Oh, there you go. I'll let you guys write this down. I'll talk over it.
So like I mentioned, where did Hitler come from? Well, he's actually from Austria, right? He's actually from Austria. So obviously, this is an ally of Germany during World War One. The culture, the language, very similar, right? And at a young age, well, he was pretty mistreated by his father, right? And as a young adult, he actually moves to Vienna. Oh, Congress to Vienna, remember that? Okay. So he goes to Vienna to try to fulfill his art career. And as he goes to Vienna, well, he realizes that, man, this once prideful place, right? And you can compare this to Germany. Germany is actually a little bit far worse because of the Treaty of Versailles. But this once prosperous place was just run rampant with many of these different people from all cultures. And you realize real quick that it's like, wait a minute, Austria and even Germany is losing its touch with its own culture, right? This, what he talks about later down the line, is Aryan culture. So in other words, well, he didn't like the melting pot that Central Europe's becoming. After World War One, with the borders just being redrawn, these new nations formed, right? And as they're mixing different cultures and groups of people together, right? Again, this was just painting the Aryan race. So he said. And in many cases, right, he looked at this and this is what fueled his motivation to gain a footing in politics, right? And again, he was very poor at the time. So as he's getting mixed in with many of these older veterans from World War One, right, these people that were extreme German nationalists, right, he starts to get a footing in the German Workers' Party. So where would they meet? Well, the German Workers' Party would meet in places you probably think, right, where people would obviously go to maybe relax a bit, right? People that were high tense, that were a little bit aggressive at the time, right? They meet at bars, right? They go to bar halls. And in these bar halls, they would talk about the glory days of Germany. They talk about the extreme national pride that they have for their country. And look at the Weimar Republic in Germany. Now we're fast tracking Germany, right? They look at the Weimar Republic and just critique it, right? They talk smack on it, right? So let's face it, politics today, right? You can all look at it and say, you know what, the direction of this country, I tell you what, back in the day, this is not what it was like. And these political parties kind of get hostile towards each other, right? Very similar back then, but this was way, way more intense in these beer halls, okay? So in the German Workers' Party, they would talk about how they're going to try to invoke this pride back into Germany, right? As they're lower than dirt with these economic collapse. The hyperinflation, the printing of money just went rampant and caused a lot of turmoil for the people. Like, again, this is the lowest point we've ever seen as a country. Let's face it, Germany just unified in 1870, right? They're pretty much a young nation, aren't they? Yeah, there were a lot of German-speaking states, but once they unified, let's face it, they're pretty young as a nation. Again, they never witnessed this lower than dirt like this before. So what do they got to do? Well, as Hitler was rising the ranks in the German Workers' Party, he was very charismatic, right? He was a great speaker, and he could speak on the pride of the people of Germany. So all of a sudden, they're like, you know what, we got our mouthpiece, right? This is the guy that's going to lead us here into gaining support to maybe get our country back, right? Because it is democracy. You can vote these officials in. You can vote these people of this party in. Anyway, the threat of communism was always there. So in other words, the German Workers' Party group, they thought because they're on the far right of the spectrum and communism's on the far left, here's a good check for them, right? Here's a good way to try to push them out, to try to keep them away from holding seats within the German parliament, right? So in other words, they thought that they were in this opposite end here to keep them away to dispel them. So as they're gaining a lot of support, and well, the Weimar Republic was failing the people more and more. Well, all of a sudden, you start to see some riots and fighting and constant gunfire in many of these public areas in Germany. Because people wanted communism. Oh, they wanted the German Workers' Party to take over. So these radical groups were fighting for power, right? Violently, aggressively on the streets. That's why many people say that World War One really truly never ended. Right? This violence just sprung up in many of these areas that people didn't know what to do when it came to picking communism, or let's say an extreme far-right fascist group, or just trying to get their life better. Let's face it, they're going through a really hard economic turn, which we just talked about, right? That hard economic depression. So in other words, he tries to aggressively take over the Weimar Republic, take over the government violently. And that's where he gets tossed in jail. Okay, so he leads this coup, right? You guys remember what a coup is? Yeah, an overthrow of the government. Remember Napoleon? We talked about him, how he did it, and was successful. It just worked. Well, in this case, it didn't work for Hitler and some of his followers, okay, of this Workers' Party. Anyway, he's thrown in jail. And in jail, that's where he wrote that book. What book was that called again? Your first term here. What, Chloe? Mein Kampf, good job. Which means what? Mein Kampf means what, Ben?
My struggle.
My struggle, good. And again, within the jail cell here, he wrote this book in detail, right? Who's to blame for Germany's hardships? Who's to blame for this economic downturn? Right? The problem here in Germany when it came to their loss of their borders, their demilitarization, the just sucking out the nationalism from the German winds, right? Its spirit. So within that book, he detailed everything. He described how his rise to power is going to lead Germany more in a better direction, right? In a stronger direction. And well, as he was in jail, this book was copied and spread all throughout Germany, right? And let's face it, did the Weimar Republic answer all Germany's problems? Did they? No, they didn't. No, they didn't. So people start picking up the book, reading it, and saying, you know what? This guy's kind of right. Right? So now we're looking towards the end of the 1920s here. Right, as that depression hits hard, as this hyperinflation is really getting out of control, right? And they start to look at this book and say, you know what? We have no other choice. Maybe, just maybe, we go in this direction. Again, the feared communist parties here are still rising in Germany. So maybe this will be the checkmate here for it. Maybe this new Nazi party will be the checkmate. All right, so as he gets out of jail, well, you can imagine, right? He starts to utilize a lot of propaganda to try to push for a stronger direction for Germany, right? Invoking this German nationalism. So much so as people are walking down the streets, they see these posters and say, you know what? Yeah, I remember this. I remember the good old days of Germany. Let's get back to it. Right? Let's get back to it. You hear these radio broadcasts that are put out by this Nazi party. And all of a sudden people listen to it and say, you know what? Yeah, I get this. I want to feel this stronger Germany again. Okay, and all of a sudden, people, when introduced to, let's say, Mein Kampf, this book here, the constant radio broadcasts, the posters of this extreme nationalist group, the pride of Germany, right? People start to fall into it. Right? Let's face it, with propaganda we mentioned about it, if you're presented something over and over and over and over again, you're going to start listening to it. You're going to start believing in it, right? Yeah, that's what the people started to do. Also, as he would make these speeches, which I'm sure you guys saw many of these speeches performed by Hitler early on in his leadership. He was very charismatic. He used his hands and motions around. Right, he actually went to acting school in order to try to really attract the audience as he's speaking. Right, as he's moving his hands all around, he's screaming at the top of his lungs. People are like, "Yeah, this guy here. Let me tell you, he's energetic." Well, Hindenburg, was he energetic? Was he? No, he wasn't. Right, so he would really grab the audience attention. He would get everybody's spirits high, their pride high, and they just never seen anybody like this before. A lot of times when you see a public speaker, they're moving their hands all about, they're screaming at the top of their lungs, and people start to feel an energy. Right. In other words, this guy's electric. Geez, he's like electric. In other words, like the people's champ in a way. Anyway, these speeches, these conferences here almost turned into like a rock concert. Can you imagine that? Like a rock concert? Yeah, that's kind of what it was like. Right? These people would start to play this loud music that the people would enjoy. Right? And they would start to show this propaganda, flags, Nazi flags everywhere. And people were like, look, this is a political rally? I thought this was a rock show. I thought this was a Metallica concert. Well, that's exactly what it kind of was, right? People are so enthusiastic by it that this starts to gain support, Right, anyway, Hitler was obviously this guy that could get the energy of the people, that could get the attractiveness of the people, right? People were literally fawning over him. And again, they didn't have television then, did they? No, so they would go to these beer halls from far and wide all over Germany. Let's face it, money back then, was it? Well, the currency was inflated, right? So it was really difficult to afford anything, but still people threw their whole dime just to go see him speak. Because he talked about this pride that he wants to impose on Germany. Anyway, as this happens, he decides, you know what, aggressively, violently overthrowing the government. That didn't work the first time, right? That's why he was placed in jail, right? That's where we see the Mein Kampf book come around. So he decides to run for president here, right? So 1932, now we're looking at it here, he's gaining a lot of support. He decides to run for president against, what was that guy's name again? That famed hero of World War One, that great general here, you guys simulated, Chase? Hindenburg? Hindenburg, yeah, good job. So Hindenburg, good. So Paul von Hindenburg, he tries to run against him. And he loses, right? I know in our simulation, you guys picked Hitler, but, right, he actually loses. Hitler loses to Hindenburg, okay? But he gained a lot of support. He gained about 35% of the population. So Hindenburg looked at this Nazi party and said, these guys are crazy, right? This is totally off the wall. This is an extreme fascist group that we've never seen or witnessed before. We can't let this guy come in charge. But, right, in a time where Germany is lower than dirt, where the people lost their pride, where communism is a big threat coming in at any moment, right, where their inflation was just skyrocketing out of nowhere, right, hyperinflation out of the wazoo. Hindenburg decides, well, I guess I'll appoint him leader of the government, right, I'll appoint him as a chancellor. The only reason he did it is because, well, he needed someone here on that other end of the spectrum here, the political spectrum, to come in and help him out. Right? If you bring in these two political viewpoints together, well, that should unite the people together, right? Can you imagine in today's world, today's climate, Republicans and Democrats actually working together? That'd be kind of great, huh? It would be really good, but obviously with politics, it's difficult to see that happen. Anyway, that's what they did here. Right? That's what he did. As you can imagine, well, Hitler decides to really push for administrative gains here for the chancellor. Right? As he becomes chancellor, he decides to really reach out and take a lot of power, take a lot of this, well, unchecked power in a way for the chancellor of the government. Hindenburg, let's face it, was he getting old? Yeah, he's getting really old. He's losing his energy, and at the same time, he's like, you know, I'm still a little bit upset about how the First World War went. Now all of a sudden I'm the president of this failing country. You know what, Hitler, just do what you need to do. So at this point, Hitler's gaining all this power, right? And really dictating what's going on in Germany under the wings of Hindenburg. Anyway, what happens? Well, in 1933, Hindenburg just dies. Did Hitler kill him? He just died. He was old, let's face it, he was old, right? So Hindenburg dies. And as Hitler sees this as an opportunity, he's like, you know what, the guy above me's gone. The guy above me's gone here. I'm already directing the nation in somewhat of a better way, so he says. And we'll talk about some of actually the progress of Germany under Hitler's regime. Some of it was actually like, oh, whoa, okay, the Autobahn, right, the highway system, whoa, okay. Right, we'll talk about the Olympic Games here in 1936. This was a spectacle to see. People actually were like, whoa, so much so that guess what? Time magazine made Hitler Man of the Year in the mid-1930s. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Anyway, so we'll talk about that here soon of what good, I know, we'll put in quotes here, what good he did for Germany. Anyway, what happens then? So as Hindenburg dies, well, Hitler sees this as a great, great opportunity. The Reichstag, which is the Capitol building of Germany, well, it just so happens it burns up in flames. So you can imagine, the people of Germany are like, whoa, 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 okay, our Capitol building is up in flames? We've never seen anything like this before. Right, you guys remember January 6th, right? The horror of that, the pictures, and you see the visuals of it. It's like, I can't believe this is happening. Well, this is an actual fire that's burning the place down, right? So as this is burning down here, right, you can imagine, right, the German people have lost all hope. So Hitler, as chancellor, decides, I know who did it. I know who did it. It was those communists, right? His communist party that's opposing the Nazi party. Well, they're the ones who did it. And then we'll talk about some of the good that Hitler did. The German people are like, wait a minute, this guy is probably right here, let's face it, right? So they start to really attack the communist groups, right? Disband them, push them away. And guess what? Was there allowed to be a rival party then, the Nazi party? No, not at all. Right, so Hitler disbands all of it. So the only party left is the Nazi party. Okay? And through this, well, now he has the votes to enable him, through the Enabling Act, become the Führer, the dictator. Right? So did it happen all at once? Did it? No, it took pretty darn long. Right, so Hitler comes around in the early 1920s. He doesn't become the Führer until 1933. Right, so I know what you're thinking, right? 13 years or so, but these are small steps. Right, it wasn't just one big leap. It wasn't like he was Napoleon where he came and just took all the power. No, this was small and building up, and he gained popularity to a point where he takes that full power. All right, so there's Hitler's rise to power. Okay, I know everything is like, how did they just let this guy come in and take it? Well, it didn't happen all at once. It took some time. Tomorrow we'll talk about some of the, well, why the German people were so enthusiastic about his leadership. Right? Again, I put in quotes, the good, right, of his leadership, of his power. Oh my gosh, I know it's crazy to say, but, well, we'll talk about the Autobahn. We'll talk about the 1936 Olympic Games. We'll mention about how he gets Germany moving, actually, in a better direction, which earns him the title of Man of the Year by Time Magazine. Look it up. It's crazy. I know. It's crazy. All right, here we go. That's good. Tomorrow we'll talk about that. And then Friday, guys, I'm going to have an assignment for you. It's going to be based off the rise of dictators. So, yeah, we're talking about Hitler now. Right? The other guys we didn't talk about yet. I get that. Right? But this will give you a little bit of an understanding before we cover it next week. Okay?